Hey, E100 people, welcome to Unit 12, if that is where you are. If not, go back and look at this video when you are at Unit 12. Don't feel like you're behind. Remember, this is a your own pace kind of an experience. But I'm really excited about Unit 12 because this is a series of 5 readings focused on the teaching of Jesus. For me, reading and rereading these texts, I just keep discovering ways in which Jesus' teaching challenges the way I imagine myself, the way I think about the world, the way I respond to other people. It tells me where I put my hope and my confidence. It's just consistently formative, transformative, challenging, insightful. Anyway, let's talk about what we're going to be reading. You're going to spend a couple of days in the Sermon on the Mount. Very, very famous text and one where you've probably heard a lot of things quoted, even if you didn't realize where they came from, even if you're brand new to the Bible. Now, to read this, think about the fact that Jesus has announced the coming of God's kingdom, or what in the Gospel of Matthew is called the kingdom of heaven. Now, we tend to think of that as meaning dying and going to heaven, and that plays a role in this, but the bigger picture is that God's promised reign is near. God is making the world right again. He's making it a place not where evil seems to prevail, but where righteousness prevails. He's taking his world back. Well, that raises the question, what does this mean then for people? What does it mean to be a subject in God's kingdom where God is king? Well, the Sermon on the Mount is the answer to that. And you're going to see in this how Jesus says God's kingdom is for the lowly, the weak, those who don't really have much to bring themselves, or those who recognize that. That it involves a call to be like God himself in his mercy, in his goodness, in his seeking of peace among people. It means living as a subject in God's kingdom. You know that God sees you inside and out, and so you submit to him inside and out. You can't conceal, you can't fake it, and you don't pretend that people are your true kings. It means you have freedom from anxiety because you depend upon God to provide for you. Ancient kings were regarded not just as rulers, but as providers. That's very, very important. And we remember through all of this that as we are following Jesus and listening to his teaching, he says, this is not going to be an easy way, this matter of being a subject in God's kingdom. A lot of people are going to choose against it, but you nevertheless are going to experience God's blessing in this, and you're going to be vindicated at the end. We're going to read a series of parables that Jesus tells in Matthew 13. Parables are difficult sayings that Jesus tells to provoke thought, and he uses them because he's challenging conventional ways of thinking. So as we're reading these, we're going to see Jesus say, well, God's reign is not what you would think. It's not like everybody's going to line up and sign up for God's kingdom. It means division. It means a lot of things that are going to look like failure, that people, the people who aren't persuaded are going to prevail. But in fact, at the end, God is going to be victorious and have a great harvest. Now, this involves some choices that we have to make. We have to choose what we know to be more valuable because it belongs to God and his reign, even if it goes against conventional wisdom. We know as we do that, we're living in a world where the world is a mixed multitude, the people of the kingdom and others, and they'll only be separated at the end. So lots of wisdom that we're taking in with these perspectives. We're also going to read Jesus' parable of the Good Samaritan, which is going to answer the question, well, what does it mean to love our neighbors? Well, first of all, who is my neighbor? That's not a great question to ask, and Jesus exposes that by using a man that his audience would have despised, a Samaritan, somebody who was nearby, who was from a related tribe, who was part of the larger people of Israel, but with whom the Jewish people had a feud going on for roughly 1,000 years. And he's going to make that guy a hero of the story. And secondly, he's going to show how that guy is willing to pay out big time for someone that he doesn't even know out of love. Why? Because that's the way God is. And Jesus demonstrates that himself in the way that he lives, in the way that he serves his people. Now, also, we're going to read a series of parables that Jesus tells about things that are lost and found. These he uses to explain why he eats with tax collectors, despised people, and sinners, the outcasts, the folks who are seen as not worthy. He's saying, I'm not just hanging with these people. I'm celebrating the fact that by believing in me, they have been gathered again into God's fold. So this is something to celebrate because this is what God has been up to from the beginning. It's the fulfillment of his purpose. So in all of this, observe what Jesus is doing. He is announcing the coming of the reign of God, the promise of God to take back his world in a way that defies the expectations of people in his time, and it defies and reshapes our expectations as well. It turns our notions of power and prestige just upside down. And realizing this, all along the way, Jesus is claiming divine authority for himself. He's claiming the authority to define God's will, God's reign, and to distribute God's blessing. If Jesus isn't who he says he is, we can't really believe anything else that he says. But if we hear a compelling voice in these stories, then we've got to consider very seriously, is this guy really God incarnate? Well, I think the answer is yes, and I hope that you will consider that, and if you haven't come to that conclusion, that you'll come to it too. And if you have come to that conclusion, that it'll be reinforced for you. Okay, happy reading, man. This is the core stuff. It's good stuff. Enjoy.